Welcome back, everyone, to episode 10 of the Shop Stool Podcast. We have another guest this episode, someone from Victoria. Again, we are racking up these Victorian woodworkers.
We're a talented bunch, Robin. That's the problem.
Yeah. So we'll get straight into this because I'm very excited for this show after going through some of the Instagram pictures. Welcome to the show, Nathan from Heimur. Is it Heimur Design?
Yeah, Heimur Design, Heimur Furniture, whatever you want to say.
Heimur Design, yeah. We've just spent the last 15 minutes discussing the name because I had no clue how to pronounce it, and I've already botched it 2 minutes into the show. So there we go.
Everyone does. It's part of the experience.
But how are you, Nathan? Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, good.
What we'll do, just to give everyone a bit of a background on you and sort of where you've come from, how did you get to be what can easily be described as a successful furniture maker?
I started by just making furniture, really. Like, it sounds so obvious, but when I first moved to Melbourne about 10 years ago, I was like 21, 22, and just had no money. And it was pretty forgiving, both in the age and sort of the era. Like, pallet furniture was really sort of trendy. So it was kind of quite a forgiving style to learn on. So I would just go, pinch pallets from building sites and nearby spots and turn it into coffee tables. And a few sort of lucky things happened where I moved into a house, and just by chance, James Reynolds, the guy that I live with, he had a workshop at Ironside. Workshop might be a stretch. It was like a 4x4 room. And he wasn't really using it. He's similar to me, and he has 1,000 hobbies at any given time. But he was like, I've got a furniture making studio. He used to work for Like Butter, just casually. He's like, you can use it whenever you want. And he was sort of my introduction into the design world. Before that, it was kind of just pretty rough and ready. You can imagine pallet rustic furniture. And then seeing his work and kind of got introduced to Like Butter and Cush through that. It was like just seeing, like, I guess the levels of it, and sort of became in love with that. The process and like using machines rather than just a saw and hammer. And yeah, but it was purely by chance, but maybe it was also just, me being pretty eager to get into the business. And then from there, I was working part-time at a timber yard after that. But yeah, just sort of one thing led to another in a sense, and the help with James and his tools, and then sort of started making furniture for my friends, and then friends of friends, and the rest is history, and it just kind of happened from there.
And have you always had that, maybe not necessarily furniture design brain, but have you always had a creative brain? Do you feel?
Yeah, definitely. I've always just like found myself making things, like even before furniture, but furniture was just such a good way. I'm generally attracted to sort of pursuits and hobbies that you'll always feel like you're kind of not very good at and like continually do. Like, you just sort of, no matter how good you are, you see yourself, like you guys' example, and like you go, oh, I would love to get to that next level. And then you get there, and then you're like, I'd love to get to that next level again. And it sort of just kind of keeps you humble in that, and keeps you motivated. Like, I guess that's a roundabout way of saying I just love learning and love that process of looking back and going, wow, I used to be so bad at this thing. And yeah,
I used to be shit, now I'm less shit.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, that's progress, right?
Yeah, I think the difference is that when you're younger, you don't realize that you're shit. And as you get older, you acknowledge that you're shit, but you can manage that emotional toll and carry on being shit.
But you're technically less shit than you were, but you think you're
slightly.
Yeah. And it's, somewhere along the line, people start asking you for advice, and you're like, how did this happen? I feel like I'm the one that should be asking still, but you've got people coming in,
So I'm trying to think. So we first met, we used to be workshop neighbours at Ironside.
Yeah.
How many years ago was that? Like 10 years?
I was just looking at my Instagram the other day of like, I always forget when I started, but I think 2015 was when I sort of created the Instagram, which would have been around about that time. Coming up to 10 years, which is crazy because...
And you stayed at Ironside right until the kick-out time, or you guys left a bit?
I left when... I think a similar time to you, like when they moved from the big woolen shed down the road, and that's when I left, because the business was sort of outgrown Ironside at that point anyway, and I was a bit, frustrated within the small, pokey sort of halls, so I had to move out. And then me and Sam, who runs Steel Scale, who was another resident of Ironside, we both teamed up together and moved to Coburg, which is where I was for the last 5 years, I think. And I've been living up here in Kyneton, which is an hour and sort of 15 away from my old workshop. So I was commuting like over 3 years. Just 2.5 hours every day. And then, just this January, I've moved the workshop up to Kyneton, which is a huge relief, and I have so much more time that I just spend in the workshop. I thought I would have all of these other sort of grand plans of what I would do with it, but I just work.
How did you find the difference in commercial real estate? Like we keep saying, and we keep encountering this with different guests that we have, that people are struggling to find stuff in the inner city or even in the city fringe. How did you find the move to commercial real estate in a regional area?
It was pretty seamless, but like we have a bit of our personal network out here is just a lot more far-reaching than Melbourne. It's kind of just everyone kind of knows everyone, and if you don't, it's only sort of 1 degree of separation. But Lucy, my partner, she knows my landlord through her work, and he sort of just offered the place, and it just happened really easily. I thought it was going to be really hard, but speaking to other people, it's I think I was pretty fortunate and quite lucky in a sense, because a lot of other people are really struggling. The price is actually not, I was hoping like it would be sort of half reduced, the rent, but it's not. I'm actually paying more than I was in Melbourne, but I have a bigger space, and it's all mine. I'm not sharing it. But
what size is the setup there, Nathan?
It's 200 square meters.
Good size.
But it's sort of divided into 2 rooms, and there's quite a large office, larger than I need. I would love to get rid of it and just replace it with machines or something, but it's not going to happen.
Do you have a bit of a showroom client space up front?
Yes, not really. I have. So there's basically 2 rooms, and one I try to keep sort of the dirty room, and one the clean room. But that discipline has kind of gone out the window pretty quick because they're both just dirty. But no showroom per se. But the sort of sanding finishing room is where I sort of keep most of the pieces that I'm working on. So that becomes the impromptu showroom when I have clients coming in and stuff.
Yep.
Cool.
So it's double the size.
Sorry, you go now.
No, I was going to say, it's a bigger space, but since I've been here, it's the first workshop that I've had 3-phase power, so I've become quite obsessed with buying these old machines and sort of churning through them. But it's 200 square is like already kind of too small, because it's just like, it's so pokey already where I'm walking through my little machining room, and then, so I feel like I might not be there forever, and I might try to find somewhere that's even 200 square meters, but it's just one big open space or something like that, where it's a bit more practical for the setup.
Bryan, just going back to what you were saying a second ago about finding commercial real estate and being tricky. I've never done commercial real estate, so what sort of issues would you run into?
That I personally have run into?
Or just in general. So you've said, it could be hard out there. In what way?
I think, especially the industry we're in, you're always producing noise and dust, which are 2 things that landlords hate. And then you've also got the stuff that Joey was talking about with the insurance risk. Like, they've got their building insurance. So the second you have a flammable source like wood dust, people often run a mile. So you're either restricted to going to... You're in a modern tilt-up panel in Coburg, were you, Nathan?
Yeah.
So those are basically your 2 options. You either go to sort of a big concrete warehouse workshop, or you find weird heritage buildings which haven't been used for anything and have landlords that don't really care about them, which is, which is getting trickier and trickier.
With Kyneton, I actually found it's a bit easier in that sense of like there's just so many sheds, and a lot of the owners aren't that fussy about sort of what goes into it, as long as bills getting paid. It's pretty casual compared to the process of finding in Melbourne it was certainly like that. They want to know what you're doing, like exactly the waste you're producing, all of these things that can kind of just sort of, they're just ticking a box going, you're not the right candidate kind of thing. Whereas out here it was a bit easier in that sense.
Do you think would the plan, like you're going to be in Kyneton long term, are you? Is that
Yeah, I think so, yeah. That's why I was doing the commute for so long, is because my lease came up we moved in lockdown, and then I think 6 months later the lease was renewed in Coburg. And I was kind of just conscious of that like honeymoon period of moving anywhere. I'm one of those people that go on holidays and go, oh, I could so live here. So like in Kyneton, I was sort of aware of that being the reality. So I was like, oh, I'll just extend it for another 18 months, and then it turned into 3 years. But before I sort of, because moving the business is a whole other thing. To move again would just be such a headache. But yeah, we're pretty set here, so I think we'd stay.
Would a home workshop be the ultimate path, or are you the kind of person that would just get obsessed and never leave your space?
I already never leave, so it would be easier if it was just closer to home. No, definitely the dream. I think, probably getting our own little plot of land and building something there would be the dream, but I don't know, all the expenses, you'd know better than anyone, all the expenses that come with that, I'm just not sure I'm ready for.
Do not get me started on it.
Yeah, the wiring and stuff alone would be a killer.
The concreting, so I'm building 150 square meters, and I'd kind of estimated the concreting at about 12 grand, 14 grand.
Yeah.
I had a quote through from a concreter, dead set with a straight face, at $30,000 for 150 square meters. I'm like,
crazy.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, no thanks.
Yes, exactly.
Mine cost 50,000.
200. Yours cost what?
My slab was 50,000.
How is that even possible, Joey?
What's that?
How is that possible?
Because council.
Crazy.
What?
Everything was so over-engineered for my piece of dirt. It's a shitty...
Oh, you're in like a landslidey area, are you?
I'm in a shitty area. The ground is awful.
Yeah.
And so they told me they engineered it, whatever reason. We could build a 4-story building on my slab. So if I ever wanted to build a small high-rise, I could do it.
Fun times.
Yeah.
But yeah, the costs just spiral. They absolutely spiral. I'm just trying to get this thing up as quickly as possible now before they go up again. So yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that is the long-term goal, to build something. But yeah, each day as it comes, and I'll just be in this workshop until that sort of presents as a viable way of doing it. I'm in no rush,
And how have you found, this is obviously something I'm going through at the minute, but how have you found in terms of maintaining your client base, working regionally? Do you think it has affected your business at all?
I don't know whether, I'm trying to find out why, but I've been crazy busy since I moved out here. Like literally the day I booked in, the guy that used to be in my workshop was a cabinet maker, and he was like, oh, you make things out of wood. I'm desperate. I just need someone to help me with all of these builds that I'm doing. And then just relying on my personal network again, outside of Heimur, like I just know a bunch of tradesmen, so like they have passed on so much work to me since I've been here. And I actually find just that sort of networking so much more organic than sort of the avenues you go down in Melbourne, say, or like a city where it's all online and it's all like, this is what I can offer you. Whereas all of these have come so organically just through chatting to people and friends, really, and friends of friends, where you're helping them, they're helping you. And I don't know, it's just easier. It feels easier and less salesy, which is something that I feel like a lot of makers always try to push towards. Like it just feels so, it's not really in my character to go out and door knocking or like sending these sort of blank emails to people and, you know what I mean, trying to get work that way. It's always just sort of word of mouth and stuff. So that part feels way more natural. And
so it's a really important difference. I've noticed the exact same thing, and probably Bryan, you're on the same path, because I'm in the rural as well, like right between two big cities, and I was very nervous about shifting away from my core city centre work and having that same sales process of what I can do that other people won't. And 90% of my current work is friends of friends of friends. I was just on the phone to a lady this morning and said, I went out to see X client that you made a kitchen for, and I saw the kitchen, and then I know the other lady who lives next door and you did her kitchen, and so I'm looking to have something made. And I mean, that's a massive job from just, there's 2 or 3 jobs that just in my little area. It's literally word of mouth, friends of friends, invite people over, and that's how you get their work. And that happens so much in smaller towns away from the city. And I guess it's a bad aspect of maybe city life where people are less friendly and less sociable, perhaps. I'm not sure if that's entirely true, but there's certainly a different level of connectivity, perhaps, between potential clients, at least.
Yeah, I think it's even just like it's so much more, I don't know how to say it, like easier to just, if someone says there's a woodworker around the corner, they will just go to around there. I've had so many people just pop into the workshops and some out here. Whereas, you know, particularly in Coburg, like, or the city, like someone would be like, oh, where did you get that bed? And be like, oh, it was Heimur. And then they go online and search, oh, I can't remember that name because it was really confusing. Custom bed. And then they find 1,000 lists of custom beds. And you just go into this rabbit hole because you're on your phone and then, you know, there's all these distractions where if it's something physical or like, you know, it's just easier in a sense. It sounds like, you know, crazy to say, but it's like how we've been doing things for forever.
Yeah, exactly.
It's only new that we kind of have
it's like we can't manage the technology we've got. Amazing, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Crazy.
And talk us through some of your work, Nathan. Like, what were your first kind of once you sort of graduated from those pallet furniture kind of explorations? What were your first piece of furniture that you made?
I got really into like the mid-century kind of aesthetic, but then trying to tie it into just sort of cleaning up a lot of those details and making it a bit more modern and stuff like that. So the bed that I still make today, the Lola bed, was probably the first real product. That and my study desk were the first two that I've sort of continually make and still do make.
The Lola's the one with the big circular rattan headboard?
That's the headboard that's sort of added onto it, but just the base itself without the headboard was what I first started with. It was just like a really low sitting angled bed and has a storage lift on the on the slat so you can access under the mattress. Cool. All of my favorite designs have always been the ones that are just sort of really clean, and I feel like, I don't know, a lot of makers I've spoken to, you feel like you nail it really early on this design where it's like that bed and then you just make it for the rest of your life now. But yeah, that was one of the first ones I did where there's the earlier designs, there wasn't a huge focus on sort of the timber joinery. Like all of my designs have kind of been a bit of a reflection of where I was at as a maker. So those beds were quite, you know, the designs I really like, you know, appreciate and are proud of, but the making itself it's pretty, I'm a new woodworker at that stage, and then it's sort of progressed as I've gone. But yeah, as I've gotten more sort of with time, like you get better at all of these joinery and you sort of challenge yourself with it. I try to incorporate anything that I want to learn, I try to put it into a design or try to pitch it to a client so that I'm sort of forced to learn that process. Yes. So yeah, as I've gotten better as a maker, the sort of range has gotten more complicated with joinery and things like this. Does that make sense?
So, sorry, I got a bit confused there. You said originally that you didn't have the rattan headboard.
Yeah, no, so that bed in particular, I like to have everything, like the original range was designed for really small houses, sort of, it was kind of just 4 hours at like a share house sort of setup. So you want it to be modular and you want to be able to put it anywhere, particularly in small spaces. So that bed was just a bed base where the mattress could sit on top, but then you can add the headboard if you want. You can add the storage if you want. There was a few different headboards, a few different sort of custom add additions to it.
I noticed that you do now at least quite a lot of rattan work, and obviously you got the bug at some point, and I've done a little bit of it, and I've never mastered it because I haven't done enough of it, and to me it's a bit fiddly. I like the look of it, but it's not really my bag. And you've kind of taken that idea and just like you're curving it in ways that I wouldn't have thought you would want to curve it, and it makes life really difficult. So could you explain your learning process from like, were you nervous on the first one, and now obviously you're comfortable with the process?
Yeah. Again, with what I was saying before, I was nervous because the first one was for a client, so it was never really that. I kind of it's a bad habit that I have of like, I want to learn cane, so I pitch it to a client, and then they're like, "Yeah, let's do it." And then I'm like, "Oh God, I've really got to do this thing now and do it well." There was a few failed pieces for sure at the start, but I don't know. For my experience, I always want to make something that you kind of go like, "Oh, how was that made?" as a maker, like when you see it, that interaction. So taking elements that have been used before and trying to find a way of sort of doing it. Originals may be a stretch, but just in a new way to me that sort of impresses me. But yeah, the process has always just been, I'm not huge in prototyping in my process. I always just sort of just jump in and see where it ends up. Like if it fails, it fails, but more often than not, it works out, it ends up in my house. I've got a house full of firsts.
It's a really smart material to use because like it's relatively low cost. It lets light through. It's soft to touch, so you can use it on things like bed heads and seats. Like I don't know why more furniture. I've never used it, but I don't know why more furniture makers don't use it.
It is a bit of a steep learning curve, and it's quite unforgiving
to get the tension on it.
Yeah, to get the tension. It's sort of closer to upholstery than anything else in woodworking. So you can get these ripples through it pretty easily. And then, the amount of times I've put it in and then you come back the next day and you're like, it's just a bit off. And a bit off as soon as you walk back from it, you can just see pulling it out, starting again. But I don't know, like anything, once you do it, I actually don't do that much cane work, just not because I don't want to, it's just sort of waves of orders that come through. So when I do it now, I have to really remember. I usually look over old notes before I do it because there's just a few key details where the tension and stuff that the
tension is the killer. That's the trouble I always had was because you're meant to wet the stuff, you soak it and then you squish it down into a groove, and then as it dries it's going to shrink and create that tension. And I've never had it where I don't break a couple of strands somewhere as the tension is too much in one area, and it's just there's a sweet spot. And there's a broken strand, you got to rip it out, and then you've got to buy another piece of it, and blah 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 blah. And so
I'm so naturally heavy-handed with everything I do. So at the start, I was just constantly breaking cane, it is cheaper than timber, but it's not that much. It's actually still quite expensive to buy the sheets, especially the wider ones. So when you do break it, it's the big ones. Devastating.
Going back to what you were saying about pitching to clients, doing new designs and trying new things, do you have quite good success with that? Getting clients on board with your vision, or is it quite tricky to convince them?
Not really. It's most. I'll usually hear them express interest. Like for example, the cane. The client was showing that we had a mood board going, and one of the images was cane. And at the time, I was really interested to get into it. I'd seen some other companies sort of playing around with it, and I was like, that's such a cool. So I just kind of lent into that rather than me saying, hey, I've got this idea. And same with at the moment, I've got a client who's. I pitched a design. She was like, "Oh, where's the dovetails for the drawers?" And I was like, I've never actually done them, the hand dovetail for drawers. Right. But if the budget allows it, let's do it because I'd love to learn. So I'm going to have to make dovetails pretty soon. Learn how to do that.
The reason I ask is I'm a lot further behind you in this process, but I hear a lot of guys at your level talking about this. We had Nick Padula on the show once, and he put out an Instagram reel not too long ago, essentially saying similar to what you've just said. But the majority of my clients, and I call them clients, maybe they're a very different level. They come to me and they say they just want something basic and functional. So that the concept of that conversation, that doesn't even enter the room. So how do you get to that point where you're saying, well, why don't we try this X, Y, Z?
I guess the options that have presented themselves throughout sort of the last decade of doing it have always been reflecting of where I'm at. They're always just a little bit further, because if someone had asked me to do dovetails 6 years ago, I would have said, I would love to, but there's no way I could possibly do it. Whereas now I'm more willing to say yes to those. And maybe the cane, that opportunity presented itself right when I just could start doing it, if that makes sense. Whereas so I'm always trying to just do not take these huge leaps, but just small leaps in progress of the design. And that's kind of the process of that.
I would venture as well, Robin, that there's a numbers game when you've been doing it for a decade or more. You're talking about a lot of clients coming interacting with a lot of clients, and like on percentage wise, I would say less than a third probably are open to doing some new fancy thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say 70 to 80% of clients do come with this is what I want, and I don't want to try out new stuff. I just have a vision for a simple box that I don't want crazy things. I don't even want to see the joinery. I don't even care if it's wood. They just want the thing. And so, like my YouTube channel was made of that 20% of clients who were willing to try something different. And this is an interesting job, but you never saw all the other jobs, which were just boring old bollocks.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it is such a small percentage that want to do that, and also have, like, to be real, it has the budget that allows it. Like most of the jobs that you get in, it's like, oh, it's super simple. I just want you to do this, and they have a pretty clear idea of what they want. Whereas some other, they come to you because they want your input and, like, how can we elevate this entry table to make it a bit, a talking point? And I'll go, oh, I've wanted to try this for a while. And that's kind of how that process happens, rather than, but yeah, you get, I'm always, just trying to seek that out, because it keeps me sort of obsessed with the craft. Because if it's just making the same thing or doing that simple job, which is just sort of easy to do and not really a challenge, you get a bit existential of, like, why am I doing this, and is this really the avenue we want to go down?
You could almost plot a graph, I reckon, Robin, of clients that are interested in the artistry of woodwork, and do they have money? Yes, no, and then cashed up bogans who just want the big picture thing, but they've got all the money, but you're trying to sell them on the dovetail side of things. Plotting where people lie on that would be an interesting one.
Yeah, and you get pretty, like, it's pretty easy to tell which is which.
Yeah.
From just a skill that you sort of pick up early on.
I also remember there was a certain, I don't get it so much anymore, but I definitely used to get enough young people who wanted something nice and arty, but had absolutely no budget and no clue what stuff cost. And so you'd price something up that was very artistic and bent wood, steam bend, whatever you name it, and then they see this huge number and they're like, I was thinking like $100, and it's like, what are we talking about? Like, and so there's definitely that type of customer as well, and they're definitely important to weed out. Just by their age, even though it's probably ageist. But if someone is quite young and they're asking for something quite elaborate, like, you've just got to be straight up and say, this is going to cost a lot of money. Like, are you ready for this? Because I could spend a week working out the price, what it's like, and then it's
I don't think that
complete waste of time.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that as well. Like saying, off the bat, that this is likely to be pretty expensive is generally how I do it. Like, when you get those clients that come in, you say, like, oh, I'm not going to give you a price now, but this will be expensive. Maybe a piece this, like I did, and you reference other pieces cost this much.
Yes.
I always do that. Like, I'll just sort of say a huge price range of what it could be, and then say, if you're happy to go ahead, like, we can sort of, work out a sketch, work out a design from there, and I can give you a more firm price. Because that's just, like, such an easy way for me to weed out those. Because, you get so many people that come in, and they've got, they remind me of me when I was younger. I've got this grand idea, and, like, if only you could help me make it, I've got $5. Will that be enough? Yeah,
it's something that I've recently been, like, I guess, observing. I probably should have put two and two together a way far in the past, but this idea that when you come to someone like us who can make something, a lot of the times, even I used to do it, is I'm thinking of the product. Like, when you go to a shop and you want to buy whatever it is, that's how much it costs. That product costs that much, and you can see there's some intrinsic value in that thing. But when you are asking us to make that product, you're not buying the product, you're buying our labor. It's a completely different scale of cost. When you go to someone and say, I want this little jewelry box, and then you say to them, well, that's going to take me 20 hours minimum, how much do you get paid an hour, and times that by 20. Like, that's kind of what you're talking about for this thing.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference in like just mindset when you come to somebody who makes stuff like we do, like completely custom.
Yeah. And that's why I think custom stuff is actually really hard to get into as like when you first start, because of that reason. Because if you've only been doing it sort of 18 months, a year, and someone's asking you to do a custom piece, you're either just going to do it for no money, or you're going to charge something so much where people won't. They'll say like, why would I pay you that when I could pay someone who's an esteemed maker to do it? So that's where I guess for me the products were easier in a sense, because you make it once and then you kind of can not compete, but you're closer to those products because you've made it once. You can make it again quicker, you can make it again quicker, and you can just sort of get that process down. And then custom stuff can come in on the side.
Yeah, and we always talk, I think, in this podcast, we've many times talked about, is it better to have a product line or be fully custom? And it's always like some mix of everything, because you can't put all your eggs in one basket. And
absolutely, yeah.
And the mood of the public clientele changes with trends as well. And it's completely, if you're stuck, I think it's very difficult. If you're unwilling to wax and wane with popularity, then probably business will be tough.
Yeah. And certainly since the sort of post-COVID era, it's been so much more custom. I think because it's maybe tougher times for everyone, but generally custom stuff is, leading to clients that are maybe not struggling as much. And I think a lot of makers are experiencing that, where it's mostly custom work at the moment and not as many products. But yeah, just being able to, like you said, just roll with the punches with that and is kind of key. If you get sort of too stuck in one avenue and this is what I do, that's kind of, I don't know, I just see that as quite limiting. Like, as long as it's made out of hardwood timber, I'll pretty much do it.
Yeah. Yep.
One of your projects I really remember was the little fishing fly tackle boxes.
Yeah, that was
they were cool, man.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. That was about 2 years ago. Yeah, I had this crazy idea. I've got a bunch of crazy ideas, but that was one of them where because I'm an obsessed fisherman, but I just see the amount of plastic. Yeah, see the amount of plastic that goes into the rivers and the environment. I was like, and I just broke so many little tackle boxes. I'm one of those people that I like to just have the least amount of gear at all times. So it's like I just made these tiny little wooden tackle boxes so that if I did break that, it would just, be returning the wood to the forest kind of thing.
Yeah.
In a sense. And I was like, I'm going to make a fly fishing gear brand, and then made 100 boxes and went, I never want to make one of these boxes again.
You did 100 of those. Wow.
Yeah. But it was a real fun process. Like, I learned so much in that time of how to make, and like, it was when you get so small, machines don't really work. You have to use hand tools, and so I bought so many little planers and made so many small specific jigs to make those boxes. Then
like little shooting boards and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I'd never used a shooting board before, and just that steep learning process of like how precise they need to be. And because they're so small, it was so unforgiving. Like, usually with a shooting board, I imagine like it's quite wide, and you can test that miter on a wide scale, whereas for it to be 100 by 50 mil, it's like
Yes. Was there a good market for that?
No, God no.
No, all right. I won't take it any further.
Yeah. No. It was. I didn't really push it. By the time I'd made them, I was like well aware that this wasn't a viable business. I just use them now as sort of gifts for people.
Yeah.
But I'm still happy I did it. Like I said, I learned so much, and I'll have a great fishing tackle box for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And like, apart from making all the jigs and things and the time invested in it, like small material cost and a good use of offcuts.
Yeah, it was all offcuts. Like, it didn't actually cost anything in a sense, because like I would have just, it would either just still be sitting there or would have gone to the burn pile for the fireplace. So it's it was a cool project.
In terms of selling your stuff, Nathan, like have you ever sold I think you've got an Instagram shop, do you, for your beds and things? Or did you used to?
Luke, who used to work for me, he set all that up. I'm pretty bad with that kind of stuff. I have just the online website, which is sort of my range, but I so need to update that. Like all my new products aren't on there. It's mostly just people messaging me on Instagram or emailing me is how I sell most of it. I don't have any stockists or anything like that.
Yeah.
Talking about your products, I saw on Instagram you've just finished a end grain butcher block iron bench. Is that yours, or was it a client?
Yeah, it was a client. So it was an old friend of mine. It was actually the guy who made my website way back in the day. It was really challenging. I had to only now, as I'm 32 now, but in the last sort of 5 years, I've really started trying to reach out to other makers for advice and help, because that's something that is a massive downside of being self-taught. Is in those early days, I would just sort of do it all myself and make all the mistakes that have been made by everyone before me, but not, not try to ask the shortcuts or take on that wisdom. Whereas now, I had to call Jem, help me with it, from Like Butter. David Emery, who's another Kyneton maker, he's got a really cool table vacuum press, and he helped me do the veneers and stuff like that. So there was just so many processes that I'd never done. I'd done the chopping boards before, but never, they were just, as you can imagine.
Yeah, the scale differences.
A chopping board, not a 2 meter long sort of island bench.
Yeah, that's massive.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask about. On a technical level, supporting that, is there quite a bit of engineering that goes on below the top? Because I imagine there's just nothing holding it together.
Yeah, and crazy how quickly the chopping board will warp if it's unsupported. But the frame, that's again where it was with that sketch initially, or the design initially, just making sure that was all ready to go. Because I have made those chopping boards, I know how they warp. And just making sure, there was enough support on all corners and throughout the middle section without impeding on the function of the bar stool side, where the legs to go under, how they didn't want a support bar underneath because it would just clutter the design. So I was okay, well, how do we work backwards from that?
So that is fully unsupported, that edge, or it's got steel hidden in it, or? No,
it's completely unsupported. It's only 250 deep. We're kind of testing it in a sense, because I was going to put a C channel under it, but it sat in my workshop for maybe 2 months after I'd made it, and I was just sort of working on the drawers. It's because of the arrangement with the client. It was sort of I do some pieces that are just going to be long term, so I've probably been working on that for about 8 months. When you could probably make it in a month if you just or less if you just did that. But so that top had been sitting there for about 2 months, and I was just testing it. We'd had both hot and cold days. Moisture level was changing all the time, so just checking. I think it's got about 1 mil of bow, and it kind of didn't stop from there. So then I've also designed it so that top can come off really easy, and if we need to put a really long C channel in, we can. But I don't think it's going to be an issue. I hope it's not going to be an issue.
That's cool. I love those Zetter, isn't that what they're called? The power?
I think so, yeah.
Switches? Yeah. Really nice.
They're pokey to install, but they look so nice.
Yeah, you made awesome. An extension table with the butterfly leaf.
Yeah. I've made a few of those now.
You have. I've never tackled it because, this is very specific, so no one wants to know about these, shut your ears. But
we're in the weeds, people.
Because there is some American-made hardware just for those butterfly extension leaves, which I've never actually been able to find or buy. But I mean, did you come up with your own system, or just copy how you'd seen it done somewhere else, or because it's not super easy?
For what part? Do you mean the
actual butterfly part of the leaf?
The part that flops. I use those. I forget what they're called. I think the sus hinges.
Is it? Okay.
It's just a standard butterfly sort of hinge. I'm not sure what they're. Can't remember what they're called. I just have them all written down on a piece of paper. I'm so unorganized with that kind of stuff. That's also a self-taught where you work alone. You don't need to know the names of things. I just need to know what they are.
Yeah, I got you.
But it's not. I think I just got it off Hayfully. They're not.
Okay.
It wasn't a really hard piece to get.
It wasn't a full kit. You were just kind of made the hardware parts up yourself.
Yeah. But the butterfly tables there. And there's so much maths that you don't expect to go into it of how particularly the butterfly part in the center, those two leaves that come out, how they fold out, how they fold back in, how they don't interfere, but then also how do you not see it from... Because a lot of the sliding tables, I really wanted to make it so you couldn't see the hardware, because I find, again, like I just want to see these things and go, how does that work? Rather than going, you can see the hardware and it's quite ugly. But that just means it's going to be a lot harder on our end to make it that way.
Yeah, add another $5,000.
Yeah.
It's always tricky to make, and I don't think there's any really good way to make a solid timber extension table with small rails. I think you always have to have a slightly enlarged side rail just to hide everything that has to be hidden, but it always makes them feel a little heavy at the top. But I don't think there's really a good way around it.
Yeah, it's so true. They do lend to be a bit more chunky, and then you can't really have a really heavy top and sort of thinner legs. Even if you can in the make, the overall aesthetic is just a bit. The legs look toothpicky. That's what I kept finding. Like I kept trying to have them really small, but then the top, it would just look a bit awkward in like the proportions.
Yeah, they're tricky.
And then another way I made it really hard for myself was a lot of the solid timber extension tables. The grain runs the opposite direction of what you'd expect. They don't run the lengthways of the table. They run sort of So I really wanted it to look like a normal table, but then that creates this whole other world because I just. At this point, I don't really know why I don't just use veneer for these sort of projects, but I just am passionate about trying to make hardwood usable for everything.
I've done it both ways, and to be honest, like it's a blessing and a curse either way. Like when you try and do a veneered tabletop, you've then got to do solid clashings all the way around the edge, and then you've got to then do this really precise sanding and finishing down to the veneer.
Yeah, that's the part that scares me.
That's scary as shit. And then when it's solid, obviously you're dealing with the weight and the grain expansion and contraction, and if you run the grain across the table, you've got to do breadboard ends, and then you've got to deal with what happens when the timber shrinks, and you've got a gap when the table comes together, and it's just like everything doesn't work for you. No matter what you do, it's difficult.
Yeah. That's the sport.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've come up to time, so let's call it there. Thanks again for coming on the show, Nathan. Really do appreciate it.
Oh, it's a huge honour.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
Yeah, and just hearing your process and everything is, it's hopefully the success continues well into the future.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's been great to be on.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right, everyone. So take care, and we will see you in the next one.
See ya.
Catch you guys.
Bye.
Bye.